might be, it's good to see that high-level diplomatic visits have come back into the fore. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, will be welcomed in London later today with a royal audience, a flypast of the Red Arrows and honours for French veterans. Isn't that good just to see the world getting back to normal? A ceremonial guard of honour will be provided by the Coldstream Guards to commemorate the 80th anniversary of Charles de Gaulle's historic broadcast known as L'Appel, or the call or the appeal, to occupied France in June 1940. Winston Churchill allowed the French general exiled in the British capital to transmit his speech calling on French people to take up arms and resist the Nazis occupying their land. That's what happened then. Let's talk about events now with Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, who joins me. Mr. Secretary, thank you for coming on the show. Foreign diplomacy starts very slowly, baby steps. How important is it? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Look, I think really important, and it's fitting and striking that President Macron, on the 80th anniversary of L'Appel, big moment for French in their history, the clarion call to the French resistance after the fall of the government to the Nazis, wants to come here and bestow on the people of London and this country the Légion d'honneur, which is the greatest accolade that they can bestow on another city or people. And actually it shows you that we squabble with our French partners quite a bit over various different things, but in our darkest hour we stood shoulder to shoulder, and it shows you the strength of the relationship. And as well as recognising that, there's a huge range of things we're going to be talking about, Brexit of course, but the cooperation that we've had, which has been brilliant, on COVID-19, on Iran, on Hong Kong. We just put out a G7 statement last night, and actually it shows the strength of the relationship. And as we come out of Brexit, come through Brexit, come out of the transition period, we're leaving the EU, but we've always said we're going to show that we can develop even stronger relationships with our European neighbours, and this is a good illustration of that.
How fruitful can the Brexit talks be, Foreign Secretary? Because obviously Emmanuel Macron can't effectively freelance on his own. There are other countries to which he must refer. I thought it might be, I'd read it was a difficult area to go down because of the fact that he's on his own. He's not representing the EU.
Well, of course, the PM had discussions with the Ursula von der Leyen and other EU leaders last week. We've agreed on both sides to energise and intensify the talks. We don't want to hang around. We're not going to wait for this to be dragged out into the autumn and the winter. But you're right. Of course,
can he actually raise Brexit, Foreign Secretary? Can the Prime Minister actually raise Brexit?
Of course, and look, when push comes to shove, the bilateral discussions will, of course, matter. The negotiation track is with Michel Barnier and David Frost, but the views and the relationship that the Prime Minister has with Macron, with Angela Merkel, other European leaders do matter. Okay. So, of course, they matter.
You and your counterparts in France, it is reported, are talking further about this idea of a travel corridor, whatever you want to call it. You'll be familiar. You've talked about them. Your colleague Grant Shapps has talked about them. Can you give us any indication of how those talks are going and when there might be a resolution?
We want to open up as a country as soon as we responsibly and safely can. You can see that this week with the businesses opening, more kids going back to school, really important. But we've got to do it safely and responsibly. And if you look at the quarantine restrictions we've got in place for people coming in here from abroad, we just don't want to see, as we've made such huge progress getting the virus down, reinfection from abroad. Now, there are a whole range of countries, in particular ones who have come through the peak of the virus earlier than us, where we should have a sensible conversation about how we can open up travel, but it's got to be done in a responsible way, and we'll work through with our French and other international partners how that can be best done.
You mentioned schools, Foreign Secretary. You know I have to turn to this, and there was a heated exchange between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition yesterday. The Prime Minister claiming the Labour Party maybe could be doing more. A, do you agree with that? B, what are your concerns about the unions? And C, we've now got 1,600 paediatricians calling on the government, Boris Johnson, to do more.
So first of all, it's really important to get schools back. We've made progress with primary schools. This week we've got those exam sitting years coming back for face-to-face time between teachers and students. We want to encourage this. It can be done in a safe and secure way. We're working with all the teachers and all the schools to do it. I do think it would help if Keir Starmer and the Labour Party don't sit on the fence on this, given that vulnerable children across all of our constituencies are the worst affected, but actually lean into this and say, do you know what, we support the government, we know it can be done safely, let's really all work together to get as many children back to school as swiftly as possible, good as a matter of social justice, but also, of course, for our economy and for working families.
But the unions are suggesting that your government has not supplied enough laptops. You seem blind to the fact that there's not enough space in some of the schools, and obviously if you have intake of 15 where you used to have 30 pupils, you might need to provide additional teaching staff.
We've addressed all of these issues there. I mean, precisely because of the homeschooling that's been done. There's a huge number of laptops and other equipment that's been distributed, and we do want to work with the schools and the teachers and indeed the unions. But ultimately, we've seen examples of where this has been done really effectively. We ought to spread that best practice, and I think now we need to be sending a very clear signal that we can get more children back to school. We want to get more children back to school. We're all working together to do so. And as you said, I think it would, or you encouraged me to comment on, I do think it's important that there's a cross-party consensus on this, and Keir Starmer should get off the fence and say, look, we support the government, it can be done safely and securely, let's crack on.
Your brief, as much of anybody in the Cabinet, is to fly the flag overseas, Foreign Secretary. Do you question the wisdom of spending around £900,000 painting an aircraft at this time, as you might be trying to take money from pensioners?
Oh, I don't think there's a trade-off there, but of course we keep our travel fleet up to date, the maintenance and repair, and it's really important the ability of the Prime Minister to be able to get to other places around the world as swiftly as possible and get back to the UK.
But why does it need to be painted? His car needs a new boot as a result of yesterday. Why have we got to paint his plane?
Well, there's regular upgrades that take place to the
£900,000.
Well, it's plain. It's not like painting a bike or the.
I know, but it doesn't have to be in such glorious colours. I mean, this is just so that it's red, white, and blue, or whatever it is. Go on.
You're seeing the French come here today. They're proud of their history. The United Kingdom.
He's not, to my knowledge, he doesn't come in a plane painted in the tricolour. I don't think he does, anyway.
Well, we'll see when they arrive. But they do things with great pomp. And
you think it's value for money, Mr. Raab?
I think we should be proud of Britain's role in the world, and making sure the Prime Minister can network amongst all of his international interlocutors is really important. And it delivers bang for our buck back home because of the investment, the cooperation, the trade that we do.
Is it true that the Chancellor is eyeing the so-called triple lock pension pledge, Foreign Secretary?
We'll keep all our manifesto commitments. There's no plans to touch the triple lock. Of course, I'm not going to preempt the Chancellor's budget. The budgets the Chancellor does, notwithstanding that there's always temptations from journalists in the lead up to any financial decisions to do so.
All right, but that is safe.
As I said, there's no plans to address that, and we're true to our manifesto commitments.
As we've seen the Downing Street briefings, you seem to have fronted probably most of them, perhaps second or level with Matt Hancock. What can you tell us about concerns over the contact tracing app? I know this takes you a little bit out of your actual brief as Foreign Secretary, but there are concerns that it might actually not be delayed. It might now be delayed, might not be available, might be delayed until winter, Mr. Raab.
Look, we've got the tracers recruited. I think it's 25,000. We've got the ability to trace the contacts of 10,000 people a day. The app is, if you like, reinforcing that, but it's right after the Isle of Wight pilot to make sure that we take all the learning from that and strengthen it and then put it out when it can be as effective as possible. It's always with IT, it's always an iterative process to get the prototype right. What you don't want to do is put the IT out there, and we know this from other countries, where it's at risk of being faulty and defective and giving false confidence. But the tracing and operation, the test and tracing operation, is already underway. It's going well. It's helping us to identify and to self-isolate those who have been in touch with people who have got the virus, and we'll continue to build on it and strengthen it.
But the Prime Minister said it would be world-beating, Foreign Secretary. It can't be world-beating. World-beating in the winter. I mean, he never said world-beating 6 months hence.
Look, absolutely, we need to make sure we refine the prototypes based on the pilots to make sure it's as effective as possible. That's what all IT projects do in the private sector. Quite right, we get it right in the public sector with so much at stake as a result of it.
All right, and just lastly, when you meet with your French colleagues and Emmanuel Macron, while we celebrate, of course, the anniversary of l'Appel, or the appeal, will anybody talk to him of events of 205 years ago? Foreign Secretary, do you know what happened 205 years ago?
I'm racking my brains, but
1815? 1815?
I'm not.
Battle of Waterloo, Foreign Secretary. The Battle of Waterloo. I wonder if we might mention that, whisper that into Emmanuel Macron's ear, how he would respond to that.
Nick, I've been discussing with the protocol experts at the Foreign Office because at Chevening we've got the telescope that Wellington used in the Battle of Waterloo. I've been gently advised not to bring it on display today. But we've got a lot on our plate. But we're delighted to have President Macron here. Jean-Yves Le Drian, the Foreign Minister, is going to be here. We've got lots to talk about, the relationship is in really healthy place, and we want to strengthen it further.
Good luck to you and your colleagues. Thank you for joining us here on LBC. Dominic Raab, Foreign Secretary. 8 o'clock, where news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, I'm Simon Conway. Donald Trump has been accused of trying to persuade China to help his chances of re-election. It's one of a number of allegations made against the US president in a new book by his former national security advisor, John Bolton. Our Washington correspondent, Simon Marks, says it details a conversation Mr. Trump had with his Chinese counterpart.